Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about ops. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, hi Frederick, the question I have for you is how does one learn how to be an operations person without being a developer first? Like, where would you get the application to practice your operations skills on in the first place if you don't start out as a developer? Well, this is a question that was posted in response to a video that I made about if are you a DevOps engineer or you're an ops person just because you are a backend developer or a full stack developer or something like that. And to spoil that video for you, no, you are not necessarily an ops person because nobody really knows what a DevOps engineer actually does. The or rather, there is a it's a loose term. It's the same thing as saying what is a microservice. There are some popular definitions, but practically nobody, like every company does it differently. They will use the word DevOps or like the term DevOps, even if it's just operations. Like they don't really, it doesn't carry so much weight how you actually implement it. So what I have said here is that usually the way that you become a DevOps engineer is now commonly that you are a developer who takes an extra strong interest in cloud solutions. Like it doesn't have to be cloud solution, anything that is infrastructure related. And we talk if you talk about, let's say, delivery pipelines, if you're familiar with tools such as Jenkins, GitLab, Travis, and I don't like there's a ton of these tooling such as say Terraform, Puppet, Ansible, Chef, Kubernetes, like all of this stuff that is that is related to the process of delivering software and the maintaining of the actual running system. This is the area there where the ops, like the purebred ops people used to inhabit, right? But since then we've moved over to the so-called DevOps definition, where you usually have a much broader you have a broader role, if that makes sense. So to answer the question, how do you become an DevOps engineer, an ops person, if you're not a developer first? Well, traditionally, in the olden days, before DevOps became a thing, and before we started changing the way we deliver software, and this is still very much the case. It used to be that you started out in some type of supporting role. Not usually the term we used for this sort of person was a system administrator, a sysadmin, something like that. That was a very common thing that you did actually educate yourself in this. An example would be you've probably noticed that you can take quite a few courses on Linux, like the operating system Linux. Now, why in the world would that be necessary? Like if you think about personal computers and so forth, I mean the common thing is for a person to have a like a personal laptop or something like that, but there's still quite a lot of jobs related to the Linux operating system, and Linux is one of those operating systems where if you know that really, really well and you understand that operating system, well, then you basically have your first step into an operations type of role. Because most, like in the old days, and still, I mean, even today, we still do that. Like, there's quite a lot of companies, guys, who have Linux as their primary operating system. The same thing goes sort of for Windows. But if you know that operating system, the leap for you to actually get into like infrastructure type of work isn't all that great. Like the leap is not that long. And I mean, it used to be the case that you had on-prem solutions where you had all your like you had actual physical servers, and you might have been a network technician or someone like that who was actually working with these sorts of systems and making sure that they were up. And I've actually had old friends that used to do that for certain companies who still have on-prem solutions, and that is their focus. Like their job is literally to just manage the actual servers and set up all the things that the cloud solutions are doing for us today. So and where you're getting your application, well, if you think about it, like it's not that many applications where you have to write any code as an ops person, like because primarily what you're doing, let's say for the sake of argument that you work for a company that uses PHP, you don't really need to know PHP to set up all the things that you need in order to run PHP. You need to install Apache, which is like it's a completely standalone application. It's like, I mean, understand me correctly now. There is no difference in installing Apache on a Linux distribution and then running it for your developers. And to install a browser on your own personal laptop, it's the same thing. It's a self-running program that you don't have to write. It's just you have to provision the machines and then set up the configuration. So you need to know something about the configuration of that application, and then you might install PHP if you have like a package manager and so forth, which comes in as it comes to the thing I was saying. If you know the Linux operating system, you should know how to actually install, depending on what distribution you're using, of course, what the package manager is and all that stuff. But you don't have to write any software. So as an operations person, I mean, the guys that I used to work with who were purebred ops people, they knew a little bit of Python sometimes, and mostly they knew a bit about shell scripts. But that was the extent of it. And so it's very feasible for you to do that. I mean, today I would say that it's probably more common is that you actually take an education in cloud solutions, like you can be a cloud engineer or a solution architect or something like that, where you actually go and take a certificate or something like that for, say, Amazon or GCP or Azure or whatever. Like usually it's the major ones that you're going to look at. And it's the same deal. Like through that process, you will acquire the skills to know how to set up virtual machines, how to provision them, or like it's very organically going to lead you in on provisioning and how to set up environments and VPCs and all that good stuff, and routing and subnets and all of these sorts of things, right? So you can absolutely get through and become an ops person without necessarily becoming a developer first. It's just that today, I mean, even today, if you wanted to go into ops and you wanted to become a DevOps type of person, you can still do that. You don't have to start out as a developer. It's just that you have to understand that the whole DevOps thing is just it's more a way of working within your company than it is that you used to be a developer and now you're doing ops, or vice versa. It's much more about a suite of tools and a way of structuring your internal work processes so that you work in accordance with certain practices. You can honestly, I think that it's not much of a stretch to say, think of DevOps as sort of operations and towards DevOps to be the same sort of transition from waterfall to agile work practices, if that makes sense. I hope that analogy can make sense to you, where it's just a different way of doing work. Both of these things still exist and everybody kind of does their own thing, but this is just another way of doing operations and delivering software within a company. So what I want you to take away from this is that it is absolutely possible for you to become an ops person or a DevOps engineer or something like that without necessarily having to be a developer first. The way it used to work was that you actually were either some like a technician of some sort, a network technician or a sysadmin or something like that, who was an IT support person for all you know. That's the way you started out. Today you can educate yourself, of course, very directly, and I mean you could do that back in the day as well, and it's still happening today, so it's not unfeasible. It's becoming less common on the other hand, because DevOps is kind of the way the things are moving, just as with waterfall and agile work practices. And where you're getting your applications from, well, there are tons and tons and tons of applications that you don't have to write yourself. Like every single company leverages third-party software pretty much every single day, and these are the things that you would focus on if you're operations inclined. Your job is not to write the application code and the business logic of your company. Your job is to provide all the tooling and monitor the infrastructure so that business logic that the developers have written actually is available to be consumed by whoever's going to consume it. Have a great day.